so that you can say, of course, it is more important just how we behave in our daily life. But if we don't have a daily scheduled practice time, then we can easily lose track of what we're doing. And it's not like we have to have great realizations every day. That's not so much the point. It's just setting aside the space such that gradually it becomes a sacred place and a sacred time of your day, that it gives a certain energy that you just are energized by being there. It becomes your refuge. So it's not just theoretical. That can be very helpful if you're having a difficult day and you come home and everything is just there for you. Your altar is all set up. But also just on any day, just continuing to have that grounding presence in your life. Sometimes we think that it's not so important externally. What's important what happens in my mind. But maybe there's something, and then something related here. I was just reading today about Tsongkhapa because we have an exam on his life story quite soon. And one of the advice that Manjushri gave to him when he had a vision of Manjushri was not to denigrate appearances, not to think that ordinary appearance is any less important than emptiness. It's similar here, that what appears to us, although it does not exist in the way it appears, we don't want to get attached to it as solidly existent. It still exists. It has a function, and it's no less real than our minds. And in that way, what we do externally, how we manipulate the external world, it then reflects on our minds, just the way that if we manipulate our minds or we change our minds, the world will appear to us differently. And so bringing that into this reality, somebody once gave me the advice that when you make water bowl offerings, for example, it's helping to bring the energy of the celestial Buddha, something beyond our dimension of reality, into our dimension, into our reality. It's helping to draw that in, to energize it, sort of like a medium. And so we need to continue to cultivate that. Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say that it's only because of our obscurations that we can't see this Tara statue as actually Tara. So that's something that related here. I think that it's the deities don't appear in our reality basically because of our karma. We experience a world that's very mundane, but if we imagine it as different, it can become different. It's our karma is very much limited by what we believe to be true, and so we can transform that through imagination. That's part of the understanding, especially in action tantra. If any of you do practices like Nungne or other action tantra practices, but even if not, even just in terms of the sutra understanding, in terms of a daily practice. So that being said, so why don't Deepti, why don't I just share it directly with you, and so we don't have to have the risk of the computer crashing and then taking 10 minutes to log in again. So I'll send this.
Sure.
I'll send this to your email. I think I should have your email.
You can send it to my WhatsApp if you can.
Yeah, I can do that. It's just
Or
I'll have to send it. Yeah, I can do it.
You're sending it through your laptop, right? So you can send it to my email. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Hold on a minute.
Can I send you my email address, Venerable?
I think I should have it.
Just direct it at CKSL.in.
Oh, that one. Okay. I have your other one, the FDNT, but okay. Yeah. Okay, it'll just take a minute, I think, to upload.
Okay.
So anyway, while we're waiting here. So the first slide here is, let's look at it on my screen, is establishing a daily practice. We have a picture here of Shakyamuni Buddha.
I'll share it very
yeah.
just.
Oh, you have it already? Okay, good. So I have a picture here of Shakyamuni Buddha with his two main disciples, with Shariputra and Moggallana. So, of course, the purpose of pictures is to remember the deity, or in this case, the Buddha. I think I've talked about this before, that the word we translate as mindfulness, it really means remembering. And that's what the practice of mindfulness is every day, is remembering these things that inspire us, that teach us. We can hear the teachings again and again, but if we don't remember them, like they say, the fault of the vessel. Okay, good. Maybe we can do the full screen if possible. Okay. How do you say that? Reading view, I believe we can do. So we gather various teachings and wisdom that we hear, but they said the fault of the vessel is when it just goes in and then the leaky vessel goes out. So we have to keep these things coming into our minds again and again. So looking at the picture, it has that effect, right? Sometimes also people might question, well, in Buddhism, why do we have these pictures? There's, for example, in the first couple of centuries after the Buddha, it would appear that there were no statues made of the Buddha. They were just an empty throne. So sometimes people question, well, is that what the Buddha intended? Maybe we shouldn't make statues. Looks like the first statue makers actually were the Greeks when they came to India. But I think maybe part of it we can imagine is that in the first couple of 100 years, people could easily remember the Buddha because the imprint is very strong after him having taught in this world. And so when it becomes more difficult to remember, we need some kind of external prop, we could say, to help us. Shouldn't be seen as idol worship, as some people might think of it. It's really, as I was saying before, it's about energizing the space that we're in. So we can go on to the next slide. Okay. So the next slide is about the purpose of a daily practice. So I just have a picture of the world here. Number 2. So of course, the purpose of the spiritual path, we have to think about much more broadly. We have the goal ultimately to be a benefit to all sentient beings. Now, I can't put all sentient beings in a picture, so I symbolize that just with planet Earth, but even that is maybe too small. We have to always keep that motivation in mind. But at the same time, as we'll talk about actually in this talk, hopefully about the Lamrim a bit, this is the most advanced kind of motivation, but there are other motivations as well. We think about trying to gain more peace in our life. That's the first stage, rather than constantly distracting ourselves or satisfying ourselves with temporary pleasures, finding something more stable, and then finding thinking about future lifetimes and what will happen, and what preparation can I make, and then thinking about liberation, and finally thinking about all sentient beings. So when we have that in mind, then we have to think about practical steps that we can do. Right? So that maybe in some sense is not unique to Buddhism, to think about the whole world, at least. That's a very commonly talked about thing these days. We want world peace, and we want a better world. So Buddhism is not necessarily unique in that. It's a question of how to get there. And one of the main tenets is that as the Buddha said, Tokmodani Ponahi, Sudan Tumpa Jukcha De, Deneshana Lapracha, Kepa Daki Nyomi Mo, which, sorry, I say it in Tibetan because it helps me to remember it. It means first I should subdue myself. I should train in accordance with the proper way to do so. Then I should train others. So masters are not afflicted, it says at the last line. So that means if somebody has subdued themselves, subdued their own mind, then they're in a position to really benefit others. Otherwise, it's sort of like everyone drowning and everyone grabs onto each other, everybody drowns. So we need to start by finding some kind of solid ground that we can be a refuge for others and not just be a burden to them. It doesn't mean we have to wait forever to help people, but we also have to recognize our limited capacity and have an aspiration to achieve something more profound that we can offer. So why don't we move on to the next slide here? Okay, so putting it into practice so we can see very practical, just making water bowl offerings, making light offerings, something we can do very easily. We don't need a lot of training to be able to do this. Although if you can make your altar very beautiful, very extensive, then that's excellent. Personally, I'm not really the type that's very skilled at arranging things, but nevertheless, I've done water bowl offerings pretty much every day since I was 20 years old. It's just been a normal part of my life. I never, or not say never, but I usually don't make very extensive offerings on a daily basis. When we're in the monastery, we don't have a lot of time. It's actually discouraged for the monks to spend a lot of time setting up their altar in the morning, but because we have to go to the puja, the main reason. But occasionally I'll do, as some of you have done the Nyingnya practice with me. I find it very helpful for my mind. It's something I miss these days as I'm more busy in the monastery, having time to take aside to do that. But if you have time to do a retreat, sometimes people think of retreat as just sitting quietly in meditation, but you can just do an offering retreat. Nyingnya is very much an important part of it. But even if you can't do an entire Nyingnya, just do water bowl offerings for an entire day. Set up the altar, make the offerings, bless them, offer them, and then take down the altar and do it again. This is a very grounding practice for our minds. Doesn't require a lot of intellectual stimulation. And so to combine together with the intellectual understanding, then we say, I'll talk about in the next slide, it's called moistening the mind. Not a pun on the water, but the point is that if our minds are very tough, then it's very hard to change much, right? It's like not very malleable. And so this is what we're trying to do by accumulating merit, accumulating wisdom, but especially here accumulating merit, is to make our mind more malleable, more open to change. And so having these accumulating merit through these practices is a very important way to do that. So as for in the previous slide, I had the pictures of the water bowls. I had been thinking about what picture to put there. I had actually put a picture of a doctor at a medical camp. The reason I'd done that is I was thinking, now we want practical ways to help people. Right? We talked about the entire world. Now we think about somebody who's a doctor, and there's a medical camp of hundreds of people potentially that they're benefiting. In order to do that, that person has to go through a lot of training. As we all know, you can't just go and practice medicine without training. If you do, you might end up doing more harm than good. So likewise, we're trying to think about how can we reach something that will be a practical benefit to people. And so this is why we engage in the daily practice. Practical benefit for ourselves in the short run and in the long run, but then especially in the long run, it will be of benefit to others. So yeah, Deepti, we can go on to the next one here. The seven limb prayer. So I believe Venerable Egdon talked about it a bit last time, and it's in the part of the course material for this FPMT module. So I'll actually just list it briefly here, but we'll also hopefully have time during the session towards the end to continue going through the daily practice, the Shakyamuni Buddha daily practice, where it's described a bit. But the seven limb prayer, seven limb practice, is a way of kind of focusing our mind within the practice. So we're not just, when we say pray, we just fold our hands and say, please, please. But it's also a way of structuring the way that we think, and the way that there are different ways of petitioning or making prayers. And so it's kind of going through those stages one at a time. It's not that we have to worry so much about, it's like every single stage doing exactly the right way every single time. We do the best we can, but sometimes we'll focus more on one or the other, but at least as we go through them one at a time, so that we get in the sort of, just becomes habitual to continue to think this way. So we start by making prostrations, which we say body, speech, and mind. So prostration doesn't just mean with the body. That also means saying the words, I make prostrations, then mentally thinking of sort of surrendering oneself to something that is greater wisdom than oneself. And then we have offerings. So for this, we can set up many offerings ahead of time, or we can do this actually as part of the offering practice. So like for the prostration practice, we could, if we wanted, do the 35 Buddha prostrations and go through do all of them, to do 105 prostrations, 3 sets. Or we can just recite that verse. And then with the offerings, likewise, we could make very extensive offerings if we want, or just recite the verse. And then confession. So confession is thinking about what kind of negative actions we may have done in the past, or even in past lifetimes, if we don't remember, but we may have done. And it talks usually about 2 different kinds of past negative actions. So you might know this term when you have naturally negative actions, which means things that are non-virtuous by nature, meaning whoever does that, like something like killing or stealing, doesn't matter if you have vows or not. It's just negative by in and of itself. But then something prescribed negative actions are when we pledge or vow not to do something, and then we transgress that. So for those of us who have vows, either as lay or monastics, then when we transgress a natural negative action, it's actually both. We've also pledged not to do it, but also we pledged not to do other things. So for lay people, the only prescribed negative action is alcohol. I should say the only one. It's the only among the 5 precepts, but actually, because you also have, for example, the refuge pledges, that we say the Kabju Lapcha, the refuge advice. So, for example, that you should respect the body, a statue of the Buddha as the actual Buddha, and respect, and even a fragment of a Dharma text as the actual text, and respect someone who's wearing robes as the actual Sangha. So those are also refuge precepts, we could say. And so transgressing those as well is considered transgressing a prescribed action. It's the opposite in the sense that the 5 precepts are what you shouldn't do. It's called Gache Lapcha, and what you should avoid doing. Whereas the other ones, the ones that is mentioned about the seeing the Buddha, the statue of the Buddha, and so forth, those are what you should do. They're Drupe Lapcha, meaning what you should actualize, or what you should practice. So by not practicing them, and likewise going for refuge continuously, going for refuge 3 times a day, offering before you may even eat a meal, and so forth. Those are all refuge precepts. And so it's not to make you feel bad. I mean, not to think we have all of these rules and all these mistakes I've made. The point is, we have the opportunity now every day to think about in what way have we gone, outside of the prescribed actions, and then to confess that. So it says confess and acknowledge, I think is how it's often translated. It actually should be the other way around. Acknowledge and confess in Tibetan, Tuzing Shakpa, which tu means just to acknowledge. So if we do something, then we just tell somebody else who's a valid person to tell. So in the case of monastics, we tell another monk, but in the case of lay people, you can also tell another lay practitioner. If you've done something really serious that requires kind of confession, you start by just acknowledging it so that it doesn't become concealment. Right? And then after that is actual confession if it needs to be confessed in a serious way. So for pratimoksha, which is the 5 lay precepts, and then for monastics, it's the monastic vows. Certain monastic vows and certain lay precepts require a certain confession ceremony. It's not just enough to tell somebody. The telling somebody is enough to stop the concealment, but then doing the ceremony. So here, even as we're doing this 7-man prayer, that can be the ceremony for a lot of things. And also for bodhisattva and tantric vows, if we have those, it's also part of the practice here. And so a lot of them, unless they're very serious, can be just confessed in front of an altar. So that becomes the confession that is said to purify it if it's done with the 4 powers. Some of you might know the 4 opponent powers, which is to first see the action as negative. So sometimes they say in English the 4 R's. It doesn't work that way in Tibetan, but it makes it easier to remember in English. So what is it? Regret, refuge, remedy, restraint. Right? So regret is seeing the action as negative. So that's the first step, right? If we don't have that, then there's really no possibility of purifying anything. And then, so then refuge is then seeing that so in Tibetan it's 10, right? The basis. So having a stable basis that can help us. We can't get out of that ourselves. Right? We have to rely on something. So even reliance is actually, maybe that's even how it's sometimes translated. I'm not sure. Reliance would be a more accurate translation. Relying on something that's more has more force than we ourselves do. And then remedy is then applying some kind of remedy. So here, just reciting the words might be enough, or if we need to, we do more. So we recite the Vajrasattva recitation, something like that. So we could do that in the context of daily practice if there's something that we feel we want to purify. And then finally, restraint, which is also important because if we do it again, it's not much use to confess it. So even if it's really hard for us to stop, we try as much as possible to say, at least for this period of time, make some kind of resolve to do that. Did I say resolve the first time or restraint? I don't know. They both make sense, and they're both ours. In Tibetan, it's larmi dokpa, so it means not doing it again, basically, not falling back again. Literally, larmi dokpa. So that's the limb of confession, and then rejoicing. Right, Lama Zopa Rinpoche always emphasized the importance of that. He said that I think he was saying that Westerners don't, or maybe I don't know. Most of you aren't what we call Westerners, but people in the modern world, they often don't rejoice enough. We don't think about, we are very much taught to think about in a critical way. And so we tend to, which is not necessarily bad, right? It's good to recognize if thing is incorrect and remedy it. But then to take joy in things that are positive, that's the main point here. So sometimes we're taught to have a positive mental attitude. That's actually the point here. We have to think about good things. And so Lama Zopa Rinpoche would always say that, and a puja, to pause when we do that, when we do the rejoicing, so that there's time to actually think about it. So we can think about things that we've done that are positive and feel good about that. J. Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa, at the beginning of his autobiographical poem, which is called, sometimes it's called Destiny Fulfilled. It just means Dokju Dun Lekma. So they're like expressing his realization and then rejoicing in it. So it starts with him saying that. He says that if I think back on positive things I've done and rejoice in them, and the merit will increase. So that's my motivation for composing this. And then also about other people and other people that inspire us, or just our Dharma friends and practitioners. Now, if we're within FPMT, it's useful to think about that, to feel a sense of harmony within the organization and feel positive about the practice that other people are doing, that we're all working together, even if we don't always agree on everything, which is actually good. It's part of the importance of having an organization, is that we all have to, sometimes we rub up against each other. Venerable Namjong, when he was director of the house, he talked about that. He heard this teaching when he was training in the pre-ordination course. He said that the teacher at the time, Sister Jyotika, had told him that the importance of living in a community as monastics, and the example she used was when he put a lot of rocks in water, and over the many years, I guess I'm not sure exactly how this example works. That the rocks rub against each other. I'm not sure if they sit in one place, but anyway, you get the point. So as they rub against each other, they all become smooth. So the example is likewise for monastics, or even for lay practitioners who are serious, that if we're around other practitioners, then all of our rough edges start to get hewn away. So it's not enough for it to live in a cave all the time, unless we're very advanced. So my point here was in rejoicing that we think about, even if things, they say, rub us the wrong way, it's actually positive. We can think about that, and it's actually, although we might be feeling upset about something, when we then rejoice how fortunate I am to have this opportunity, then we see it in a very different way. So then we have the two requests, right? So requesting to live long and requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma. These are requests to our teachers or to Buddhas in general, requesting the Buddhas so the teachers to have long lives. And we can also think about in requesting the Buddhas, celestial Buddhas, to manifest in this world, to remain in this world. I think that we need guidance, and if there are people in the world praying for that, that's the condition for that to manifest in the world, in whatever fashion. Right? We don't always know who's a manifestation of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, but we can trust that there are at least some in our world. There have been in the past, and there's no reason there shouldn't be now. And so we pray that they appear now in accordance with the times and give teachings or lead people, and may lead animals in whatever way is suitable. And then requesting to teach. So especially not just that they are here, but that they actually give teaching. So when we request them to live long, of course, we offer the Dharma throne, the symbolic of them being the auspicious symbol for them to be able to stay in the world. And then when we ask them to teach, we offer the Dharma wheel, similar to how it said that Brahma offered the Dharma wheel to the Buddha to request him to teach in this world. And then finally, dedication. So we dedicate our merits and other merits of others to enlightenment. That is a seven-limb prayer. It's good to start our practice with that. I always personally, whenever I start a new how would you say, a new project. I mean, I was going to say a new class here in Sarah, but also it's not just that, it's any kind of Dharma project. At the very least, I tried to do the refuge formula and then the seven-limb prayer and the mandala offering. That's also in the refuge precepts and also in the bodhisattva precepts, that whenever we initiate anything, we put our trust in the three jewels. So it makes it a Dharma project, right? Once we start that, and then we finish with the dedication. Okay, so why don't we move on to the next one? Next slide here. So the mandala offering, it was also said, ought to be described a bit. And so with mandala offering, you see here, this is the mandala set. So I think most of you already have some experience with this familiarity, but still, just to talk about it briefly. The word mandala means a lot of things, and actually queued up here, I have so in the book that I've been putting together, my teachers' teachings on succession Guru Yoga, I put a glossary entry on mandalas. And so just to talk about it briefly, because in the Tantric tradition, I have it here on my screen, that there are 7 kinds of mandalas. And so this is actually a little different than what we're talking about when we do the mandala offering. So sometimes we can get confused by that, because a mandala offering is not necessarily a tantric teaching. So I have also, in a non-tantric context, a mandala can mean, in a general sense, a basis or a sphere, right? Such as an earth mandala or a wind mandala, like it's understood these so what support the world in the ancient Indian worldview, or a sphere of knowledge. Likewise, in Vinaya, some of you might not be aware of this. We use the word mandala in Vinaya when we do any kind of Vinaya action, like sojong. We have to create a mandala. It's a space within. I think the word I used earlier, sacred space, is probably the best way to translate that. So the idea here with the mandala offering, it has to do with that second one I mentioned about the world system. It's a basis for the world, that we're offering all the wonderful things in the world. And so we visualize that in accordance with the ancient Indian idea of the world. It doesn't matter so much whether it's literally true or not, but it's symbolic of all the wonderful things. And then we have the jewels. It's good if you can have a very nice mandala set with jewels and so forth that symbolize all of the wonderful things, but also symbolize more deeply your own realizations. And also it talks about the inner mandala offering your afflictions too, that for those to be transformed, everything that you have becomes part of that offering. And there's many different levels of that. So when in the tantric context also, as I mentioned, there's 7 different kinds of mandalas, and there's different understandings of the different levels of mandala that are offered. So it says in the course material that we should, as the teachers, teach you about the mudra for mandala. So I think most of you already know that, I'm guessing, but nevertheless, I'll see if I can get it on the screen here. Okay. So when you have the mandala, if you don't have a base, if you have a physical base like the one on the screen, you don't need to do this. But if you don't, and you start with the pinky fingers and then the thumbs, and then put the 2 ring fingers parallel like that, and then interlace the other 2 fingers, the index finger and the middle finger. So I don't know, it's rather complicated. It took me some time, and nowadays it's quite natural, but for many people at the start it can be difficult. And then it's good if you have a mala, a rosary, to keep that also, so that it's like you're offering something and not just empty-handed. Or if you have a bell, you can also hold the bell. And then just when you offer, use idam guru ratna mandala kabir tayami, like this offering. So as for the 37 heat mandala, which is the one that's pictured, I don't have time to go through all of that today. Venerable Legden had mentioned there was a translation he edited that he's hoping will be published. He has lost track of it because he submitted it to FBMP, and now it hasn't been seen for some time. But at some point we can have it available. If you're interested in the mandala offering, also there's a teaching online available from Kensur and Vijay. Losan Tarchin, who was taught in America for many years, now passed away. He's from Sarah May. So I think if you just search for that, it's available. There's a little booklet we have in the library, but the whole thing I think is available online.
Venerable, what should we be searching for? What should the
so
search
the
say?
name, let me put it on this chat so that you know how to spell it. So that's, yeah, mandala offering. I don't remember the exact name, but I'm sure if you search, you'll find it. And then this is this publisher from New Jersey. So if you look for that, I think you should be able to find it if you would like to learn about the details of the mandala offering. Also in his book on Gandharva, the 100 deities of joy, of the land of joy, which is the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. But I believe the book is just called Gandharva, which is by Lama Zobar Rinpoche. It might be available on the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive website now. There's a teaching, in quite an extensive teaching on the mandala and the symbolism behind it. I'm sure even if that specific one is not there, I think on the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive there's quite a lot available. Oh. Okay. So why don't we move on to the next slide here? So, and then we talk a little bit about what does it mean. I mentioned this before, to make the mind moist to right realizations. This is a very nice picture. I took it from the cover of my teacher's book because it gives a good sense of what we're trying to do in the practice. That if our mind is just simply in our ordinary state, an ordinary level of consciousness, we can think about it as it's very solid and kind of rigid is a good way to put it. We're very fixed in our understanding and our views, and that's reflected in the energy of our body as well. That's why you see this as a physical process. So we need to moisten that, to make it more malleable. If we just have intellectual understanding, it doesn't reach to anything beyond that, to beyond the head. We have to bring it not, we say the heart, but also in some sense to the whole body. It has to be almost something that you feel with your body when you have a sense of faith in the Buddha, a sense of compassion for beings. All of these are emotions that we can experience physically. And so doing these kinds of practices, it should open us to that. It should open us to these energies, you see, like the energy flowing there from the visualized deity. I remember many years ago when I was a layperson, I was working at the Milarepa Center in the USA just before I ordained. And some of you might know Paula Chichester, who was a nun at the time. She'd done a lot of retreat there at Milarepa Center, actually. I wasn't able to attend the teachings because I was cooking, but it was on the speakers. I remember hearing her talk about this. And from her own experience, she was saying that these light rays that we imagine dissolving into us, she said that's qi. She said she'd worked a little bit with qigong, and she said that's what it really is. I think that's a good experiential description, that we're talking about something real here. In a sense, it's not just, it's imagined, but the imagination makes it real. If we have a very strong imagination, it becomes that much more real. So somebody might say, well, it's just imagination. But if we experience a physical sensation, that is real, in the sense the sensation is real. A dream is real, right? It doesn't mean the objects of the dream exist as they appear, but there's no denying that we have dreams and that they affect our minds. So in the same way here, as much as we can make it a real experience, and that has to come through this accumulation of merit in this way. I was thinking about a course I taught some years ago. So I'm just going to look at here, because I should have the slide here. I won't be able to show it to you all, but I want to remember my a verse that I translated from the Nagarjuna, which I think is quite relevant here. So the point here that Nagarjuna is making is about not just studying, not just having intellectual information. Hold on. Okay, here we go. So this is from the 60 stanzas on reasoning, which personally I feel very strongly about this text. It's something I just felt that I taught a course also on that text, and I often felt there's just something quite special about this text by Nagarjuna. It's called 60 stanzas on reasoning. It is reasoning, but there's something quite beyond the reason in there, I think. So let me read these two stanzas. So those seeking suchness, which means emptiness, right? Those seeking suchness, first of all, to them say everything exists. Later, when they know these things without attachment, teach the void. So when people are beginning, teaching them that everything is empty of inherent existence can actually be counterproductive. We start to think of everything as dry and meaningless. So we say things exist. There's real merit. There's a real spiritual path. There's a real Buddhahood to achieve. There are wonderful things, that wonderful celestial beings that are guiding us. Doesn't mean it's not real, right? In the conventional sense. So it says, when they know these things without attachment, later when they have less attachment in their minds to physical reality, to real, not just physical, but the way things appear, to real things, then teach emptiness, teach the void. So it says, then it goes on, those who don't realize the void, engaging in mere scholarship, but not creating merit, these ones, the worst of beings, destroy themselves. So if somebody doesn't understand, not just intellectually, and realize emptiness, realize the void, it says here. If somebody doesn't have an actual experiential understanding of this, then engaging in mere scholarship, which we see there, it's not to criticize anybody, but we can look in the world. There are many people who read Nagarjuna's text. It's become very popular, which is excellent. I don't think it's a bad thing that's happening. But if we read the words of the people their descriptions, often it's very much an intellectual argument. So it says then, by not creating merit, so there's no daily practice, there's no integrating this into our lives. So now, the way he says it, these ones, the worst of beings, destroy themselves. So that might go against my saying we have respecting people for what they're doing. I think the point is just for our own understanding that we think about if we just fill our minds with lots of information, then we destroy our spiritual path. It can actually become an obstacle. Venerable Roger, Rinpoche's attendant, he gave me that advice early on. He said, when Rinpoche had told me to learn Tibetan, but Roger said, be careful. He said in his experience, he's watched a lot of people, and he sees that for some people, they get so attached to the learning and to becoming a scholar and to becoming proficient in the language and in the textual tradition that they forget the original point of practice, and then they aren't able to maintain that. So they destroy the seed that they had to continue. It becomes very much just an intellectual thing, which then they reject. Ultimately, I've seen that happen also. Now that Venerable Roger said that to me, I've noticed that as many years here, that some people, they have that kind of expectation that simply by studying and learning, that will transform their minds without having any grounding in the daily practice. So we have to be careful of that. Doesn't mean, again, that we shouldn't engage in the study. As I said, Rinpoche himself told me to do that. And that was, Roger was just saying to be careful when we do that, not to fall into the wrong direction. But we have to really have both. So why don't we move on to the next slide? I realize I'm talking more than expected, which is normal.
Venerable.
Yes, please.
May I ask a question? If it's not
No.
relevant,
Yeah. If it's relevant,
please, that's
okay.
fine.
Okay.
I'd like to understand merit.
Okay.
Because who decides an action is meritorious or not?
Yeah, it's very, okay. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and besides, somehow it makes me feel that, when, not that I've seen too many people do it, but maybe I think you could sort of go after accumulating merit. Like you said, you could, be intellectual and then miss the point of the practice, but you could also then maybe run after merit and, accumulate merit without, is that possible? Without
Absolutely.
really, whatever, following the path or something like that. But essentially, I don't understand merit. Who decides something?
Oh,
Can I
yeah.
decide what is merit for myself? Or that doesn't work that way?
No, that's a very important question also. And that comes into why we need the wisdom also. We need to understand what we're doing. And we can have a very rudimentary understanding of what merit means, which at first might be helpful, but we have to move beyond that. We have to develop more. That's a very deep question. But let's just to give a few things, because a lot of the things came to my mind just now as you said that. So for one thing, there's talk about like different ways of approaching religious practice. And one of the more basic ones is kind of what's called a magical worldview, where we have the idea that there's somebody up there, we sometimes say, who just pulling the strings and made all of these rules for us. And that's just the way things are. It's almost like a childish way to look at the world. It's all very simple and straightforward. And that might be helpful for some people at some stage of development. It might be better to think that way than not to have any sense of meaning in life, or just to think that everything there's no consequences to action. But that can also be an obstruction for a number of reasons. For one, it can lead to dogmatism. And it also, we can become very attached to certain things being meritorious and certain things not being. So as to your question of who decides, no one's deciding. It's similar to the idea of karma, right? One of the wrong views of karma that's presented, we have the Four Noble Truths. And so within the second noble truth, the truth of the origin, the basic wrong view is to believe there's no origin, in the sense that suffering doesn't come for anything. It's just random. There's no particular cause. There's no way to abandon that cause. But another much more subtle wrong view is to believe that there is karma, but that it's created by some kind of God. That somebody is up there manipulating and making these laws. Which is a very common way to think. It's how in a lot of religions that is understood as the truth, at least in the exoteric tradition. But here in Buddhism, that's taught to be that's not quite how it is. It functions in and of itself in the same way that a seed gives rise to a sprout. So we wouldn't ask the question, well, who decides why a barley seed gives rise to a barley plant and not a wheat plant? It's just the nature of things. It's like just the natural. It's the way things are. Now, it's not inherently the way things are. It has to do in terms of the external things. Scientists talk about the blind watchmaker. You may have heard this analogy, that if you find a watch on a beach, you might try to figure out, well, how did this come about? Who made this? Right? It's something you've never seen before. You assume that somebody designed it because it's so complex. So it's likewise, if we see things in the world, we just assume that somebody designed them. This is how often traditional worldviews were. Then why are animals so predisposed to the particular environment? Well, somebody must have designed it that way. But as science has advanced, we've understood more about how natural selection works. So likewise with karma, it's a natural process. It's not that somebody had to make it that way. It's inevitable that certain things will have certain results. And so but the difference between this and the example of the seeds and so forth, of course, is that it has to do with something that we don't perceive with our senses. So the more difficult question is, which I can't get into very deeply here, but is of course, how do we establish all of that? How do we establish karma and things like that? But in terms of merit, the very specific question you're asking, I think actually sometimes merit it's probably the best translation because we have to have something. In Tibetan, it's sunam, and in Sanskrit, punya, or punye, I think punya. And so I think of it, if we had to make a more meaningful translation of it, it's like positive potential. That you gather positive potential throughout your lifetime, and you carry that into your lifetime from previous lifetimes as well. So we talk about charisma, for example. Now that charisma is not equivalent to merit because somebody can have great merit and not have much charisma. However, I would say charisma is a manifestation of merit. It's one way it can manifest. That somebody just naturally is like magnetic to that other people are magnetized to them. That has to do with merit from the past lifetimes or in this lifetime, but more likely from the past. I remember His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying when he met Mao Zedong, he commented that it was like being in the presence of a strong magnetic force. Right? So that is somebody with very powerful merit. Doesn't mean they're doing good things necessarily, but they have to have that. Somebody who has the merit to become a leader of a country and have people worship them, then they definitely have to have accumulated a lot of potential, a lot of magnetic force. So we accumulate that all the time. We're always accumulating some kind of potential on our mind stream. So merit isn't really any different than just virtue, practice of virtue. So who decides that putting water bowls on an altar is meritorious? Well, nobody. It's just it's a dependent arising between many factors. So the most important factor is our own mind, that we are we have a positive motivation, but we use the external props as a way of focusing that, of enhancing certain mental state. And likewise, there is, in this case, like on the altar, there's what was called the yulgitok, the power of the object. So it's not just our own mind. There is the power of the external object, which is an enlightened being. Now it's just a statue, but because it has that symbolism, it then carries that energy, as I talked about before. And so if we really have the conviction that this is the real Buddha, it has the same effect as if the Buddha was there, and that merit becomes kind of it was worked together, and then also the external object in our own minds, but also the physical thing that we're doing. The world has a certain energy as well, physical things, and we utilize that. If we're very skilled, we know how to transform that into merit. That's Lama Zopa Rinpoche was exceptional at that he knew how to manipulate external conditions. He often talked about feng shui as being a very useful skill. The idea here, whether we call it feng shui or we have trained in that discipline, but the point is we can manipulate external things to be kind of aligned in a way that it enhances that magnetic force that we're creating. So, for example, imagine if you make water bowl offerings in your room, but your entire room is just a mess and there's things all over the floor and it's not, and windows are dirty and all of these things, then the effect on your mind is not the same as if the room is very, very neat, very clean, smells nice with incense. That makes more of an effect in your mind, which is going to make more of an effect on the amount of merit that is created. It's not that somebody decides, the Buddha decides, well, I don't like it when things are dirty, I like it when things are clean. It's mainly for our own minds. If somebody is very advanced, they can use even that kind of situation. That's what's understood in Tantra, is that you can use any kind of situation, even if it's disgusting from worldly perspective, but use the energy of that and transform it. So I've gotten on quite a tangent here, but I think it's a very important question you're asking. It's very central to what we're talking about here. And the last thing that came to mind, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'll let you finish.
Okay, so the last thing that came to my mind when you said that, there's a story of Dharma. You might know. He was an Indian monk. Nobody really knows if he actually existed. I'm not sure if there's any concrete evidence, but in the Chinese tradition anyway, they believe that Bodhidharma came from India and was his teachings led to what became the Zen school, the Chan school in China, and the Zen school in Japan. So there's a story that when Bodhidharma came to China, the king, who had been a great sponsor, a donor to all the monasteries in China, he asked Bodhidharma, how much merit have I created by all of my offerings all of these years? And Bodhidharma said, no merit whatsoever. So there's a number of ways to understand that. The most sort of mundane way would just be to say that Bodhidharma was combating that the king didn't have the right motivation. But another way to understand it is that he's talking about emptiness. He's talking about if we attach too much to this is a real thing, this is real merit, then we start to solidify it. And that actually becomes an obstacle. It becomes less merit because our mind is then becoming limited and closed off. And then we can actually become biased. It's like I talked about earlier, becoming dogmatic. We start to think that, for example, this is actually, I think, quite important, because I've noticed this also in my own meditation, something I've thought about. We learn about how much merit, there's so much billions of merit in this action. If we get too attached to that, we can then denigrate other people. So we see people who aren't practicing Buddhism, we think they have no merit because look, they don't even do one mantra, and look at how much more merit is in one mantra. When I was searching online to make these slides, and to find a picture for some of them, I searched for, I think I just searched for accumulating merit to see what kind of picture I could get. And I found an article I came upon, and the title of the article was something like, in the modern world, there's so little merit, so we have to do these very strong measures to create merit. I think that's actually a bit of a dangerous view, because then we start to see that everything it's actually the opposite of having a pure vision of things. We start to see everything as degenerate and mundane. And we start to think that other people, we don't rejoice in other people because we think, well, they're all just going to lower realms in the next life because of the little merit they have. It's not nearly so concrete and not nearly so simple. So anything, a small thing, can become great merit depending on our mind and if we rejoice in it. So we have to be very careful. We at the same time as we don't want to fall into nihilism where we just think that nothing is right or wrong and nothing is good or bad. But at the same time, not so attached to it so concretely that it becomes an obstacle to developing our own potential and to recognizing the potential in other people.
Yes.
Okay, now, yeah, please, you wanted to say more?
Yeah, but I guess I'll just say it, but I think I've got the answer too.
Okay.
But an observation was that merit in the Buddhist whatever lexicon or whatever is probably rooted in certain cultures too. Do you think? Because like certain things, like let's say I walk into a Dharma center with my shoes on. Of course, that's not good merit, creating good merit. But if I walked into, let's say, a church with my shoes on, which is also a spiritual place, I don't think I'm, getting negative merit because of that action. So do you think some of it is based in certain cultural practices that where the religion is from? But it's not a very useful if like
no, what you're saying is very important. Yeah, I think merit in and of itself is not a cultural thing, but what is a meritorious action is a different question, right? And so etiquette, for example, that's really the point you're making, is what is proper etiquette and what is thereby considered meritorious or not. Yeah, so for that, absolutely, it is very much based on cultural norms. It's interesting that what you just say about the shoes. I think I may have mentioned the story last time I was there in Bangalore. I can't remember, but there's a story in I think in Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand. He talks about. Even my classmate also told me this once in the context of something else. But the story is of a very simple villager from Tibet who came to the statue of Maitreya in Lhasa. And when his mind was so simple that he didn't even think it was anything unusual to be talking to the statue. And he had a conversation with the statue, and it started to rain. So he was concerned that the statue would get wet, so he put his shoes on the statue's head. Right? And then later the temple caretaker came around and got very angry and took the shoes away. But then, so I think the person's name was Ben of Kungyal. So when the temple caretaker took the shoes off of the head of Maitreya, Maitreya said to the caretaker, no, put those back. I'm holding them for Ben of Kungyal. So the point is that he had such strong faith in what he was doing that it became a positive action. He had no idea that there was anything wrong with that, right? The point is, well, once we can learn the etiquette, it is useful because we know what kind of things might offend other people. And we also, the practices as they're laid out are designed to fit human psychology. They're designed over many generations by masters as what they've recognized as useful, expedient means. So if we can make use of those, we can also benefit from that. We could just make up all of our own practices. So we could say, well, rather than doing prostrations, I'm going to do sun salutations or something like that. But if we do it, if it has a great effect on our mind, then okay. But if we can learn to do the practices the way they've been taught, and then actually have the right mindset, we have a whole set of things that are available for us. So until we're able to design that whole system again ourselves, and even so, even if we did do so, the problem is then it's very much just for ourselves. We don't share it with the community. So as I mentioned before about thinking about being part of this organization with the FPND, with the CKSL, and for me here being here part of Sarah J, it's also talked about collective merit. There's so much merit in being here. This is something I rejoice in every day, that I don't have to make a lot of effort to make things, to make it meritorious. I just have to go to a puja and there's 1,000 people there and we're all doing it together. So likewise, we have to agree on certain parameters of how we do things together. If we don't do it our own way, then there's no cohesion. So the ritual, because what you're talking about is very much about ritual, the etiquette. It's a way of grounding the mind, as I talked about in the beginning, in this physical reality. So likewise, there's nothing wrong with particular words, the particular 4-letter words that are offensive to people, but I wouldn't say that here because it will most likely offend people. It's not inherently right or wrong, but we're all very conditioned to think of that as meaning a particular thing. So if we're going to be part of this cultural context, it's useful to learn it, but at the same time, not to get too, again, not to get too both attached to it, but also not to beat up on ourselves, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Right? So, okay, I accidentally wore my shoes in the temple. Okay, maybe it's okay. Maybe actually I generated merit from going to the temple. We can think about all the good things I did. But as over time, we try to learn it and try to learn how to do it as best we can.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next thing here is about hearing, contemplation, and meditation. So this is quite a broad subject, but it's something that we are meant to go over in this course because we have to understand the way that meditation is understood within our tradition. So meditation in a broad sense, maybe I can use the word practice, right? Because meditation specifically here is one of the 3 steps. But when we talk about spiritual practice, it's not just meditation. It's not, and meditation, now, it's funny, I say it's not just meditation, and I use that word at the beginning, as a general word. I'm thinking how we express it in Tibetan, and monks always talk about how all 3 of these are meditation in a general sense. The 3rd one is meditation in the very formal sense of generating deep states of concentration. That's what distinguishes it. But that's not the only kind of meditation. right? The word for meditation in Tibetan, gom, it means to habituate. So all of these are ways of habituating our minds, of training our minds to think a certain way, to tend to give rise to positive thought more frequently, and to, when we experience situations, to interpret them in a way that's beneficial and constructive rather than always having a negative view of things. That comes from training ourselves. It's not brainwashing yourself, right? That's why the contemplation aspect we'll talk about is very much the opposite. It's about using reasoning. But it's also about recognizing that certain ways of thinking, which we're very conditioned to, are harmful. They don't benefit us. They just lead us into the same problems again and again. And so we want to train ourselves in a new way of using our minds. So we'll go to the next slide here, which is hearing. So hearing, the reason they use hearing traditionally is because in ancient times, that's how we learn things. Literally, somebody would speak it to us. And I read, and it's actually surprising to me. It's hard to believe this, but this seems to be accurate. Quite well, how do you say? It's quite agreed upon by scholars, is that before about the 12th century or so, it didn't even occur to people to read a book quietly. It was something that you did out loud. You looked at a book and you read it out loud, because the books came from oral tradition. Before, not too long before that, people didn't write anything. Everything was spoken. At the time of the Buddha, everything was spoken. There was no written words in India at that time. Everything was memorized because that was the only way to preserve it. So very gradually it was written down, but mainly as an aid for memorization or for recitation. So the understanding in our tradition is very much the sound. The sound carries the particular energy and symbolism that is passed down. So that's why it's called hearing. But of course, you see here, I have pictures of books. This is our new library. I thought it would be nice to put a picture. We just started putting the books together this week after several years of trying to get this all finished here at the house. So hearing, or just study, learning, the first step is to gain a very vast knowledge. It's not enough just to have a little understanding of Buddhism. If we really want to practice it, we have to have a very broad understanding so that we can put everything in context, and that we can see things from many different angles. His Holiness the Dalai Lama often talked about that. Now, since maybe I don't get too distracted, but I have another thing I can show you here. That'd be useful. One moment. A quotation from His Holiness. So this is what His Holiness Dalai Lama gave this advice to the founding members of our house, Geshe Namdak and again Japa Keldon, about the importance of study. So His Holiness said, "The delusions are very difficult to remove, as we have become deeply accustomed to them over many lives. The Tibetan tradition of Buddhism is unique in emphasizing the importance of prolonged and deep study in order to bring pressure to bear on these delusions from many different angles, so as to eventually be able to eliminate them. Undertaking such study and practice is not easy, requiring a great effort over an extended period of time." So this is a lifelong process, right? Doesn't mean that we just do all our hearing and then we don't start contemplating and meditating until later. But we have to continue always expanding our understanding. So another very important thing that's unique, actually, within our school, the Geluk school, some kappas of understanding of how we gain non-conceptual understanding, of non-conceptual realization of emptiness, or in a broader sense, in a religious sense, we talk about mystical experience, which is the goal of a lot of esoteric kind of religions, is to gain something beyond ordinary mundane experience. And in a lot of religions, the understanding how to get there is that we have to empty our mind of our ordinary concepts, that those are obstacles. With the ordinary way that we think about things, we have to have less thoughts. We have to be abiding in silence. Whereas Tsongkhapa had quite the opposite understanding of it, that we have to cultivate a correct understanding. The more we have a correct understanding that approximates the way things actually are, because it can't ever say exactly how they are. The book is not the real thing. The word is not the real thing. But the more we can gain an approximation of that, then the more naturally it will just come to us, the non-conceptual understanding. It's not just going to come out of nowhere. We can think about that even in worldly things, right? So somebody who's an expert at some skill doesn't have to think a lot about it. We can even show that on brain scans. People who are experts in a particular skill, like playing the violin, they don't have to have the same much effort when they do it. But to get there, it requires a lot of effort and a lot of learning, such that it then becomes is done, how do we say, second nature, not something that we have to think about anymore. So likewise with compassion, with emptiness, things like this, we have to gain a very clear conceptual understanding of them. Eventually, it's no longer something we have to think about consciously because it's just so natural. But that takes a long time. And so in the meantime, as much as we can, it's not everyone has all the time in the world. You see all these books. Actually, I haven't read all of them either in our library. I try to read as many as I can, but I don't know if anyone in our house has read all of them, or even half of them. But nevertheless, we try as best as we can to increase our knowledge all the time. It's not just intellectual. It shouldn't be seen as a distraction, not practice. Okay, so now we go on to the next slide, which is contemplation. You'll see, I don't have a picture of a person sitting alone in a room thinking. I have a picture of debate, because this is how we contemplate in our tradition. And one of the reasons this is important is that it shows contemplation doesn't just mean integrating information. It also means questioning it and coming to our own conclusions about it. So that's the stage of contemplation. It also occurs at the stage of hearing. Some of you might have heard of the idea of a valid, inferential valid cognizer, meaning that we know something through reason and not through direct experience. So Kejip, the student of Tsongkhapa, he said that inferential valid cognition, so knowing something through reasoning, occurs at both stages of hearing and contemplation. But at the stage of hearing, it's something that is mainly based on somebody else giving us reasons and us thinking about them and coming to see them as valid reasons. Whereas at the stage of contemplation, it's very much from our own investigation. So that's a stronger kind of inferential valid cognizer, although it's also, both of them are valid, right? But it's as we develop this latter one, the one that comes from our own understanding, it's also, it opens the door to develop many more, right? So for example, somebody can explain something to us and we can come to understand it. But if they have to explain every little thing to us, then it's going to take a long time. Whereas if we develop the ability to figure it out ourselves, we can then apply that to everything else and gradually figure out more things. So we have to start by having the grounding in the hearing and the study, because we have to have some basis for what we actually contemplate on. Otherwise, it's just very simple, a few simple things. If we have a lot of information, then we can start to integrate it and come to conclusions about it. And so then we can go on to meditation. So meditation, as I mentioned, here it's talking about deep states of concentration. So that's something that actually is very advanced to get to the stage of meditation we're talking about here. So for example, at the great monasteries, Sarah J, Sarah May, the other ones, They talk about the monastery being a place for study and contemplation. They don't talk about meditation usually as the main activity. Of course, there are monks who are doing this. There are actually monks even in Sera who are in long-term retreat, but it's not the normal focus of the monks in the ordinary program. It's something that to get to that point takes a lot of cultivation first. For some people, they might do this earlier on. But the understanding is that if somebody if they immediately go into meditation retreat, for example, at a young age, their ability to benefit others will be more limited than, because their own mind is not as expansive. For example, there was one meditator, we have a picture of him actually in our library. I didn't know who it was until the teacher at our house, Trungpa Kelton, told me who it was. There was this meditator that was a Tibetan layperson, and he asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama many years ago for advice about how to practice, and His Holiness said, in your case, just read the Lamrim and then go into retreat. So he did that, and we could see from the picture, it just looks quite like something quite special is looking at him sitting in his cave. Now, we can't say for sure, but generally people say that he has had to have realizations, but his ability to teach was quite limited. We just have the picture of him in his cave, because somebody doesn't have the whole groundwork of the philosophy that they can then reach others. So if one has that, then eventually, then developing single-pointed concentration, one can break through to more non-conceptual understanding. Or even before that, just through meditation, to have it be what we call it's uncontrived, which is what I was talking about earlier, that it doesn't need to have intentional cultivation. So if somebody has uncontrived bodhicitta, which actually I might talk about a little later, is that the person doesn't have to make specific effort to have bodhicitta arise in their mind. It just naturally occurs. So ordinary people have uncontrived minds all the time, but it's not necessarily positive. It's often negative. So we don't have to put effort to get angry or to get attachment. And we see somebody that we find attractive, we don't have to work to make ourselves attracted to them. It just happens. If somebody says something nasty to us, we don't have to spend a lot of time making ourselves angry. It just happens. But that comes through habituation. That is also a kind of meditation, but it's called sumin in Tibetan, meaning like it's incorrect, improper meditation. It doesn't actually lead to the goal. It's just our mind thinking about things in an unskillful way. But when we can do this skillfully, then with meditation, eventually we can. So as I said, the point was, the first stage in meditation is to generate an uncontrived experience. And then later we can have a direct experience, at least with emptiness, where it's actually non-conceptual. It's just as we would like seeing something. So for example, somebody who, like, for example, if we think about somebody who believes in a God, then at first they might have just an intellectual understanding of that. And later it becomes uncontrived. That's when they just always feel the presence of God in their life. And then a direct experience would be actually if they see, like they would see another person. Right? So likewise here with emptiness, it's that first just to have an intellectual understanding of it, but then later it becomes uncontrived, that it actually becomes as though we feel all of the time that things are empty. We understand them as empty, and it affects the way that we think and that we act. But then the direct experience is when it's just as much as we can see the books and the bookshelves, we can see emptiness. So that comes through the very advanced stages of meditation. Okay, so now we go on to the next slide. So now we have concentrative versus analytical meditation. Here's a picture of my teacher, Choe Khor Sum Ling. So briefly, then within meditation, we can divide it into these two different sets. The concentrative meditation or concentration meditation, placement meditation, is when we focus on one object or one so object is the right word, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing, right? An object means an objective basis, something that we focus, some objective basis of focus, even if it's emptiness, even if it's compassion. And with that, we try to generate stronger and stronger concentration so that we're not distracted. So this is often what people just think of when there's meditation. And that's an important part of meditation also. That's part of why at the beginning of every class, I always like to sit for a little while, because we have to have some level of concentration. We don't want our minds being too distracted. Otherwise, it's very hard to think and analyze. But then the analysis itself is a kind of meditation. So likewise, the hearing and the contemplation that I talked about, but at a deeper level, even within very advanced states of meditation, it's understood we have what we call calm abiding, which is an extreme form of concentration where the person can stay on an object for as long as they want and have a sense of blissfulness about it, the pliancy, meaning that the mind doesn't feel uncomfortable. Everything just feels very natural. They don't have to feel like I have to get up or shift my position. We can just concentrate on that object. But if somebody has only calm abiding, then if they try to think about other things, their mind starts getting disturbed again. So they have to bring themselves back to that object. If somebody generates what's called special insight, which is an enhancement of analytical meditation, then the analysis itself actually increases their sense of bliss and of comfort in what they're doing. So we might not get to that level, but even in our ordinary experience, if we think about things the right way, it can actually increase our concentration. It can increase our sense of peace. It doesn't have to be disturbing. We have to think that I just don't have any thoughts in my mind, otherwise I'll be disturbed. Right? That's not going to lead to liberation, because it's just a way of essentially blocking things out for a period of time. But through analysis, we can transform them. It's wisdom that really is liberating. So we shouldn't. So the reason this is relevant here, we're talking about daily practice, is that it doesn't just mean that we sit for half an hour quietly every day. That's not a bad practice per se, but that's not what we're usually cultivating in our tradition. We also want to spend some time thinking about things and analyzing them, thinking about the points of the path and the teachings that we've received. Okay, so we'll go on again to the next slide. So then there's a question of what does it mean? I use the word object, focal object and aspect. So as I said here, an object doesn't mean necessarily a physical or an objective thing. It means that we have, I used the word before, objective basis. It's to support, to keep the mind focused. We have to choose an object. So that object could be a physical thing. Like traditionally, we might meditate on a statue of the Buddha that we visualize. That's an object. But we can also focus on a mental state. We're trying to cultivate compassion. Now, actually, if we're trying to cultivate compassion more specifically, the object will be sentient beings. Right? So there is some kind of thing that we take as the object versus the aspect, meaning in what way do we engage with that object? So if we're thinking about sound as impermanent, that's the classical example, then sound is the object, impermanence is the aspect. We take an object, but then we contemplate it as impermanent. If we're thinking about compassion, we take sentient beings, that's the object, and then the aspect is going to be wishing for them to be free of suffering. If we're meditating on emptiness, then the object can be anything that we choose to focus on, the emptiness of something. It's not just a vague emptiness. It has to be emptiness of a particular thing. So we think about a chariot or the nature of the self. So we think about a self. When we think about ourselves, that's the object. And then aspect is going to be the different stages of contemplating on the emptiness of the self. So sometimes you'll see the term enhance the object and aspect. It means that to gain a clearer understanding of what those are and give them sharper focus in our minds. Yes, do you have a question?
Yeah, Venerable. It's maybe slightly off the track, but my basic initial training was, I attended these 10-day Goenkaji
Yeah,
tradition.
of course. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So when we were comparing about, whether meditation practice, calm abiding versus insight. So I attended quite a few, and that continues to. So the calm abiding, where we do the anapanasati, and basically the insight is through anicca of the sensations in the body.
Yes, yeah.
So what I've seen over the years is, as I moved from Goenkaji tradition into Mahayana practices, when you're talking about bodhicitta and emptiness, uh, still the base practice of watching the breath. So, 10 hours in those 10-day retreats, 10 hours a day, watching your breath, and the sensation still remains my, core practice.
Hmm.
So is that the right way to kind of continue? Because within that, that insight of just sensations of anicca, dukkha, and anatta still helps me in the Mahayana path. So I would just want your advice on that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good question. Generally speaking, yeah, I think it's good. It's helpful. It's supportive. Um, and I personally also find, I mean, it's not with the terms of, like you say, breath meditation. It's not that it's not existing in our tradition. It is absolutely. Even in the Lamrim, he talks about that as a useful. If you look at what is your primary delusion, and for a lot of us, I know this is certainly for myself, just being the mind getting scattered is a big danger. And so the breath meditation is a very good way to manage that and to keep focus on the breath. And as you're saying about Goenka's courses, when you're meditating on the body, their understanding of vipassana is different. Their understanding of the special insight is different in some ways than our tradition. Although I don't think they necessarily are contradictory. It's just a very strong, different emphasis in a very strong way. And so for a lot of people, that is helpful today because we tend in the modern world to be very distracted. There's too much stimulation. And so rather than using intellectual thinking to try to focus on the sensations in the body, which is, it is a kind of analysis. It's a way of looking at the nature of things. And it's not to say that it might not also lead to the same experience ultimately. Like I talked about, Tsongkhapa had a different understanding of how to lead to non-conceptual experience. It's not that it's necessarily the only way to do things. And even within our tradition, as I said, I think we have to look very much at who was being taught and in what context. So the Tsongkhapa lived in 14th century Tibet. It was a very different place than things today, and in very important, deep ways. It's actually useful to think about that, not just say it. And of course, we all know that. Think about how different it was, in what ways. And even Tibet was very different than China at that time, for example. And we look at what kind of practices flourished in China that were fitting for people in that culture. Now, that doesn't mean that thereby it's irrelevant to us today, but we have to make it real for ourselves. And so just to force it and say, I have to do it this way, even though it's not helping me, that's not going to actually help us to understand it. But it's also good to try it out. And so as you're saying, you've done Goenka retreats, it would be good to try doing retreats within the Tibetan tradition also. I mentioned about Numne practice, which I really like, which is very different from doing a Goenka retreat, but might also bring similarly some kind of different experience than you're used to, because it's something quite different to be doing that, to be doing fasting, to be doing prostrations and chanting, and then other kinds of practices, so mantra recitation, and these analytical meditations, but doing them, as I said before, it's not enough just to do it once. So you don't just look at this morning, if I meditate on my breath, I'm calm, but if I think about the meaning of the Lamrim, I'm not calm. Maybe so, but also look at what is the effect over the course of a year of doing that. It takes a long time to see the results of this. It's certainly something I had to trust in here in the monastery. I early on was quite skeptical of this whole program. It would be just years and years of debate every day. It certainly didn't calm my mind to go to debate in the early years. But over time, I definitely see that it has been helpful. I've seen the result of doing this for so long. It's given me a lot more strength of mind and focus. So it took, at first, it had the opposite effect. Before I was here, I was meditating a lot more. And at first, it was sort of opening. Another thing that's actually relevant here, and sort of my own story mixed in here, but it's probably useful, is that I think to a certain extent, before I was here at Sarah, I had developed a strong amount of concentration, such that, not like calm abiding or something like that, but enough that ordinary things didn't really bother me because I could just concentrate my mind and not think about them. Which was, then I would want to stay in that space because it was more comfortable. But then going to debate and having to talk all the time and having to be in frustrating situations and not being able to just go and meditate, it brought up things that I would have otherwise just kind of blocked out. And it's useful to bring that into our practice and to learn to transform that rather than just avoid feeling that way. It doesn't mean that, again, we don't want to go to the extreme of thereby I just always interacting with people and so on and so forth. We have to integrate both. So as you say, if it's still helping you to do the Goenka style meditation, it's probably good to still do that. So you can do some study, and then if it disturbs your mind, then do the meditation. But now you have something new to work with in your mind, rather than it just being the same every day. And you know, take your time with it. There's no need to feel I have to do it this way or this way. It's not that one is necessarily right or wrong, but it depends how deeply you want to go in one practice. So if you're really attracted, obviously you're here and taking these teachings, you have some interest in the Tibetan tradition. If you want to go more deeply into it, it's worth putting effort into that and slowly seeing if you can make it meaningful for you in the way that the other practice has been.
Right. Thank you, Venerable. So
Yeah,
I have
okay.
got into studies with, say, Geshe Dorji Damdol. So I've done some retreats on emptiness. So what
Okay.
basically I'm seeing is that even I've been able to luckily trying to integrate these two. So like within
Mhm.
sensations, when I'm watching, I can understand that they don't have an intrinsic objective existence. And I find then the teachings on emptiness and bodhicitta integrating into my experiential practice of sensations and anapansati. So I'm not finding a conflict. So I think, am I on the right path?
Well, if you're not finding a conflict, that generally, yeah, that's a very good thing. But also, sort of as I hinted at before, if you find conflict, it can also be good.
Okay.
Sometimes you only can find a new resolution if it's conflict, right?
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so why don't we go on to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so this is Lam Rim. You see, I have this here in quotations. Because again, I'm taking the structure a bit from the FPMT, what they encourage us to teach here. So it's to explain what is meant by Lam Rim. What does the word Lam mean? What does the Rim mean? So it's really quite simple. Lam means path, Rim means stage. But how did we get there? How did this develop? So the understanding here is that the Buddha gave many teachings. And if we just, for example, pick up a collection of the Buddha's teachings, so a collection of sutras, it's not in any particular order. The Buddha tended to teach just to the dispositions of people at the particular time. And so how do we begin to approach it? And there were various attempts to do so throughout the course of history of Buddhism. And this gradually developed into what became the Lamrim in Tibet. There wasn't particularly a Lamrim system in India. The understanding of the basis for this is the text, The Ornament for Clear Realization, which is attributed to Maitreya, which talks about how to put the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, which are the most essential Mahayana sutras, into a stepwise practice. And especially in chapter 6 of that book, the ornament for clear realizations, Abhisamaya Lamkara. This chapter 6, it talks about consecutive, targi. So like, how do we say in English? Sequential, serial practice. So putting things in order and meditating on them in a particular order. So when Atisha came to Tibet, he also emphasized this as useful for the Tibetans because he felt they weren't understanding how things fit together. So he composed this text, The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And that the tradition then developed itself, and later that text was commented upon by Ngok Lotsawa, Ngok Lodin Sherap, who was a great master earlier than Tsongkhapa, in his text Tenrin, which means the stages of the teachings of the Buddha. And then his student Drolungpa composed an even more extensive Tenrim Chemo, the great stages of the teaching. So Tsongkhapa was inspired by that tradition, and that's how he came to compose his text, the Lamrim. So the point is that it takes all of the teachings of the Buddha. It's not something other than that. It's not creating his own teachings per se, but then putting them in a particular order. So it's not that it necessarily all happens in this order. Our mind is a little more messy than that. If it was so easy, we could just go through it one at a time. But it's also helpful to have that kind of structure. For one thing, it's helpful for memory. We can whenever anything occurs in our lives, we can think about it in a particular context and have a broad context for thinking about it. And whenever we're practicing, we think about the different levels of the practice. If we understand this intellectually, it gives us that structure in our minds. So you see the staircase here, right? So it's up a hill. So imagine trying to climb a hill. Well, that a staircase, it's harder. But if the stairs are all there, we just go one step at a time. It's very simple. So likewise, we structure our minds through what we habituate with. So in the Lamrim tradition, there are the stages. Essentially, this is based on Atisha, is talking about the three capable beings. It's lower, medium, middling, and greater, or to say advanced. So these are just different levels. It's not just stages of people. It's stages for one's own practice. So we go through these stages one by one, and we come back to them again. It's not like we have to have a complete mastery of the first one before moving on to the second one. So for the lower capable being, it's mainly thinking about turning our minds towards following the spiritual path. The main contemplations are on, first of all, death and impermanence, and then thinking about future lifetimes and what might happen to us in the future, and thereby thinking about refuge, thinking about something to guide us and to support us, and thinking about karma in a general sense, thinking about the consequences of actions. So then in the middling capable being, then it's thinking more deeply about the nature of things, thinking that it's not just enough to have a positive rebirth in the future, because we're still in the same cycle. So we want to be free of this entirely. So thinking about more deeply about the nature of suffering. And so this is essentially the culmination of what we call the Hinayana path. It's not a very nice way to speak of it. Maybe we can say Saravakayana, but it's the corpus of teachings that are focused on self-liberation. And so all of the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, on the 12 links of dependent origination, they all fall into these contemplations. And then above that is the advanced, the greater capable being. We say above, though, so you can't go to a higher step, just like you're building a foundation. So you can't have you can't build if there's no foundation. But if we have those foundational practices, then we start to think about compassion and thinking about benefiting the all beings in the whole world, is that original picture I had. So that's where our spiritual practice becomes beneficial not only to us, but to many people. Now, even at the initial stages, it will benefit many people, because if we become a more compassionate, or more, not compassionate at the beginning, maybe, but a kinder, less, more patient, less inclined to anger and other negative mental states, it's going to benefit many people. But even more so when we can actively work to benefit others, and that's what we cultivate with Mahayana. which is the greater capable being. It's thinking about the two main facets of Mahayana are bodhicitta, which is the wishing to become enlightened to benefit others, and then emptiness, understanding the nature of how things exist. So we can move on to the next slide. So also it's, again, within the FEMT course material, it said we should talk about a little bit what are the signs of specific realizations that somebody could have. This is the last slide, and I actually had some other things. I mentioned I would maybe go through the daily practice with the Shakyamuni Buddha, but obviously didn't have time for that. But we did get through the slides. So I think I'll just finish with talking about this. So within the Lamrim, this is understood with the various realizations that we're trying to cultivate. What is the signs that somebody has achieved that? But most importantly for ourselves, how can we judge? But then also externally, how can we know when somebody is qualified and they manifest these signs? So there's a lot of different talk about this in various teachings and the different ways to recognize these things, even the very advanced realizations. It said that somebody else's level of realization is not a very hidden phenomenon, meaning that it's something we can actually access through observation, but it's not necessarily easy. And in some cases, it can be very hidden, depending how strongly the person actually manifests those realizations. But if they're very at most advanced levels, they should be obvious. And so there's also talk about the signs of somebody who has cultivated these in previous lifetimes. So we can even look at that, like in the text, the Mahayana Sutra Lamkara, also by Maitreya. It talks about the signs of the lineage, which means the signs of somebody who's practiced Mahayana in a previous lifetime. So it's that before they even begin to practice in this life, they're just naturally compassionate person, and they're naturally patient and interested in the teachings, the Mahayana teachings. So Chandrakirti also talks about that when they hear the teaching in emptiness, they just have a visceral reaction. The hairs stand on end. They might even cry. So those are signs that the person has met these teachings in the past. But it doesn't mean that they have realizations now. Right? They're still a beginner in this lifetime, and so they have to cultivate that no matter what. They can still go off course unless they're very, very advanced. So then the signs within this lifetime. So within the lower capable being, some of the obvious signs should be that the person doesn't engage in strong negative actions, or that if they do, they show obvious signs of regret in trying to remedy what they've done. That's a great sign of a Dharma practitioner when they apologize to you. That even though they might lose their temper sometimes, if they show clear signs that afterwards they thought about it and came to the conclusion that was a mistake, that's an excellent sign. And so those are the more coarse aspects. That's what we're working with in lower capable being. We're trying to cultivate just a sense of responsibility and awareness of our impact, the impact of our actions. And likewise, when somebody has refuge, that it should be, we should see that in the way that they talk about their teachers, the way that they, I could even say their eyes light up when they look at pictures of the Buddha, things like this. It's something we can observe. It's not necessarily exaggerated. Sometimes when people are newer, they exaggerate these experiences. That's why I said it's something we have to observe over a long time, of knowing the person. It's not just something we can necessarily see right away. But as gradually we look at the way, so it said the only thing we can see is their speech and their body language. So we learn to observe those in others, and also within ourselves, of course, we can see more than that. So we can see what comes to mind. When somebody says something nasty to me, what is the first thing that comes to my mind? Do I immediately take refuge in the Buddha, or do I immediately snap back at them? Right? So then we have the second, and the middling capable being. So when somebody has renunciation, has realization of impermanence, some of the signs that are talked about. So I looked for a picture on this of this online. I couldn't find one, so I have a picture of His Holiness here, but it's somewhat similar. Is this the way the person holds their eyes? If they're walking in a very crowded space, it's what's encouraged for monastics to do. Is just look 6 feet in front of them. So if somebody doesn't seem very attracted to things that are normally attractive to other people, so that is a sign that they have some level of renunciation, some understanding of the downsides of those things. They just don't naturally respond to it, and that's something that takes time to observe in others, and it takes time in ourselves. We might not recognize it's happening because sometimes we can't see these changes that happen over a long period of time. So it can even be helpful. For example, if you keep a journal, read your journal from 5 or 10 years ago and look at what was going on in your mind and see, does it seem foreign to you? That actually might be a good sign if things have changed. But it's good. It's not considered selfish to look at one's own experience. And sometimes people think, as spiritual practitioners, we shouldn't worry too much or sort of ruminate too much about our own experience. But rumination is happening if we're just reinforcing the same thought pattern again and again. But if we just are very introspective, that's a positive thing. Lama Geshe actually once said, he said, if you look back over your life from the time you were born until now and think about what was going on in your mind, what was motivating you, they said that is spiritual practice. So that's what we're trying to do, especially in this second level, in the middle capable being. Become very familiar with our own habitual tendencies. And sometimes we have to remember things that we've done in the past and think what was going on in my mind. And gradually we should be able to see that change if we have strong introspection. Introspection means being aware of what's happening in our mind, rather than always thinking about external things and worrying about situations in our life. So then we have signs of the advanced realization, the Mahayana, so bodhicitta, of emptiness. So some of the signs of bodhicitta, or at least of great compassion, would be that we see that in the person where they express themselves. When they hear about suffering, it says in the text that if they cry, that's a very positive sign. They are seen to have some emotional reaction to it. They don't close themselves off. Now, it could be many different reasons that the person is crying. So that's why I said we have to observe them over a long period of time. My classmate and I were joking about that when we were talking about this in debate. We were saying, well, then if somebody is really a bodhisattva, they should never be able to stop crying, and they can't even go out in the street because every time they see somebody, they start crying, and that would be quite an obstacle. They can't control their emotions, right? So it's not going to always be obvious if the person has that. It should be manifest at certain times. You have to be very attentive to people. We learn this also through mindfulness practice, being mindful and being able to recognize subtle cues that people give. Okay, I don't want to get too distracted, but it is actually very interesting. Paul Ekman, who some of you might have heard of as a psychologist, he worked with His Holiness quite a bit, and was very impressed by him. It seemed to have really changed his life in a significant way, and in the nature of his work. And he had a book called Emotions Revealed, which he had written the book before he met His Holiness, but he made a new edition later, and included some of his experiences with His Holiness and meditators. And he said that before he met His Holiness and met Tibetan meditators, he had said that the people who have the best ability to recognize what he calls micro-expression, which means recognizing subtle changes in a person's facial expression that reveal what they're thinking and what their emotions, was mainly two people. It was psychotherapists and police interrogators. But when he met very advanced meditators who had not necessarily intentionally cultivated the skill, their ability to do that was more enhanced, was better than anybody he'd met. And he, not just through anecdotally, but putting the person through test where you show them a particular, like a slide, a movie of a person and try to say what's going on in their mind, notice something from the way that their facial expression. So that's just naturally happening. That's a bit of a digression, but the point here is we have to also cultivate those abilities. It's something that when we practice mindfulness in our interactions with people, this will benefit our ability to respond more skillfully to the situation and to be able to help people and not to say things that are going to be upset people, because we might not recognize it's upsetting them if we don't recognize these subtle cues that they give. So the point here is that when we're looking at teachers and we're trying to judge, is somebody a valid teacher, signs of these realizations, or if it is for ourselves, if we're trying to recognize in ourselves how far we have gone, we have to be very attentive to look at their body language and their speech and the kind of things they speak about. It's not something that can just happen immediately. We don't just want to run to a teacher immediately because they impress us on the first experience. We have to look very deeply over a long period of time and talk to people who know them and through all kinds of different methods to look for these kinds of signs. Okay, so it's 7 o'clock now, but we may have a little bit of time for questions at the end, if anyone might like to ask anything. Yes. Yeah, please, please. Yeah, you can take off the screen now. I mean, I suppose we can all see each other.
Venerable,
Yes.
thank you. I had a question about the idea of blessings.
Okay.
We talk about merits, and I was thinking about when Madhvi asked about this. We talk about merits and we talk about sometimes the merit to be with the Guru, the merit to see the Guru, or the merit to learn from the Guru. And we talk about precious human rebirth and everything. And all of that as something that arises from accumulated merits and purification and things like that over. So when all of this is there, and then what is a blessing? So
Okay, yeah, that's a good question.
I'm thinking about this because sometimes people say, oh, they were so lucky to receive the blessings. There are two, and then I've heard people say there's nothing called luck in the Buddhist context. Then what is a blessing? Bodhisattvas and Buddhas are constantly thinking to benefit other sentient beings, right? So there is always that way. If I look at it from my late term, that would be a blessing. But then people say, oh, they don't get a blessing. They didn't receive the. So what would a blessing be?
Yeah, so a few things about that. The word for blessing in Tibetan is jinla.
What?
Jinla. Jinla. So the word jin is almost untranslatable, but it means essentially magnificence, splendor, almost like magic. Like there actually comes from the word sijin. So we look at the Buddha and it has this 6 foot aura of light around him. That is the sijin. So the person has an extraordinary energy. The word la means wave. It's like a wave in the ocean. So the understanding is that the person is transferring some kind of energy to you. So grant me your blessings. It's that something about their extraordinary merit is somehow you're getting some piece of that by being part of that. So in English, it's very interesting to look at these things. Like the word bless. Actually, the word bless, because I researched this a bit also for the upcoming book. I wrote a bit about this in the introduction. I was surprised to find the word bless is related to the word blood. It comes from an Old English word about how to anoint somebody with an animal sacrifice. But I think it took on quite different connotations later on, so I wouldn't worry too much about the original meaning. So later it was adopted as Christianity spread in England. So the understanding, it seems to somehow, I can't remember exactly what it said, but something about the word bliss also. It is somehow related, even though, at least not necessarily historically, it didn't come from the same source, but in the people's minds in medieval times, they kind of understood these as similar. That it's a similar idea to what they're talking about in Tibetan, that there's some sort of force that's much stronger than yourself, and you kind of tune into that, and it can awaken that or transfer that to you in some way. We also have the word inspire in English, which of course means literally to breathe into something, to breathe life into somebody. But also originally the meaning was that through the blessing of God or whoever, that it could cause a particular thought to arise in your mind, which also in the Buddhist tradition, they understand that. Like Tsongkhapa talks about that, for example, if you have a dream, sometimes you can have a dream where it is in a blessing of a deity, not a super mundane deity, but just an ordinary, like a worldly spirit, but a deva, where they cause you have to have a particular dream. They cause something to arise in your mind. It could be prophetic. So that is considered a jinla also here. So when we want blessings here in a Buddhist context, of course, what we want is to have realization. So it's praying to have this realization arise in my mind. So it's not that we're saying that the other person does the work for us and they just transfer their realizations to us, because the Buddha said quite clearly, right? The sage does not wash away sins with water, nor transfer his realizations to our mind, or dispel suffering with his hands, right? So that part, he doesn't transfer the realizations to our mind. But at the same time, we don't want to be so fixated in this idea that I'm real and you're over there and we're completely separate and there's no interaction between us. It's not like that. We exist interdependently. And as I said, with merit, it's so slippery almost. It's like if we are around people who have extraordinary merit, we share in that somehow. It's not that they just give it to us like I give you a candy. But for one way to understand it is that we have a lot of different propensities, and it magnetizes that propensity to ripen versus something else. So we're putting ourselves in a condition where that happens. That's what Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to talk about, that the cause has to be our own past karma, but the condition is very powerful, the external conditions. In terms of, again, this sort of just a direct transfer, like do we actually get something from them? Again, it's not entirely to be dismissed. It's not, again, it has to, the mind has to be ripe for that. That's what we talked about before. So it's not that they can just, otherwise, as said in the teaching, the extreme consequence of that is everyone would already be enlightened, because the Buddha would already give everyone else enlightenment. But when we open ourselves to something, we're more able to receive that. And so really the question here, because sometimes people ask, if I pray for somebody, how can it help them? Because karma is individual. It shouldn't be that I can pray and it helps them. But really, by that logic, I shouldn't be able to give somebody medicine either, because they have the karma to be sick. So that doesn't quite work. It's possible for us to influence other people. The question here is all influence physical? And here it's talking about a different level of reality that is beyond our ordinary sense experience. But it shouldn't contradict the idea of individual karma any more than somebody talking to us and teaching us, or somebody giving us medicine. But it is harder to access this subtler level. And so with our faith, that's the dependent arising between our faith the practice that we're doing and the power of the object, then we can open to that. So in short, the answer is that it should do two things for us. It should lighten the presence of affliction in our mind, give us more space to cultivate our mind. And secondly, it can help us to develop realizations, like this thing about causing a particular thought to arise in somebody's mind. Like Shantideva says, in the flash of lightning in a dark night, in the same way, occasionally in the mind of beings, there arises a positive thought through the power of the Buddha. That how hard it is to get that thought to manifest in ourselves and in some people. But everyone has those potentials. It's not that it is giving us something that we don't already have, but that potential might be very latent. And so to open that to manifest that potential, to cause that potential to ripen as opposed to some other potential, that's what we want from the blessing of the teacher of the Buddhas.
Can I, Venerable, ask a
Thank you,
follow-up
Venerable.
question? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, please.
It's not entirely the same, but related to what you were saying about karma being individual and whether somebody can influence us or not. And it's also related to the practice, the daily Buddha Shakyamuni meditation, the 7-limb practice that we were going to cover but didn't get to. In that text, in multiple stages, it says, and here is where the Buddha grants you realizations, or there's a transmission of realizations happening, or he increases your realizations. I mean, Guru Buddha, as like your Guru manifesting as Buddha Shakyamuni, and you also receiving some sort of awakening of realizations from the other objects of the refuge at that one part of the practice, right? And I sometimes was feeling a bit disturbed about this exact thing, that on the other hand, we say it's not like Buddha can enlighten you, right? You like have to put in the effort yourself, but also because of my sort of faith / confidence / devotion to Gache Rinpoche, who composed the text, I'm like, no, I'm not going to be putting a very different interpretation on top of this than what the text says, because that text says you receive realizations, and it feels good for me to visualize it that way or be experiencing it that way. And anyways, it's like I can't exactly specify the question, but there's this similar slight contradiction between the text saying we receive we receive realizations, and at the same time, it's not like Buddha can enlighten us on our behalf. So thought if you have anything to add to it or comment on it, that might be very helpful.
I think the main thing is that it's an imagination, right? So we imagine this happening. So we're also part of the process. Right? The Buddha didn't just come and bop us on the head. Right? We had to be active participants within that process. And so, of course, the more we also intellectually understand or have a sense of this making sense, the more we won't have those kind of doubts arise in our mind. So that's why we also, especially when we're not doing the practice, have to really examine these things and think about it and question it like you're doing. So we need both aspects of it. It's maybe not helpful all that when we're doing the practice directly to be asking all these questions because it's distracting. But if we notice them arise in our mind, that's okay. But then when you have time afterwards, then really think about it. Think about, what does this mean? And it's not just that's not like there's one answer that's easy. It's something we have to think about for a long time, as we say, for many different angles, many different ways of considering what could or could not be happening, what ways is it not possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there are no questions online, Venerable.
Okay. So why don't we?
Anyone?
Yeah, why don't we do the closing prayers in that case?
Okay, can I share it?
Yes, please. Oh, sorry. Venerable Legdon made it very clear to me. I have to remember to ask you all. He said, please tell if there are things you would like he or Keldon to discuss next time, because it will be one of the two, I think in 2 weeks.
Venerable, one thing that we wanted to request was if the teacher visiting could lead us through light offerings.
Okay.
As it's a special request because we've gone through a process of cleaning the entire center, and
Okay, okay.
volunteers have worked really hard.
Okay, okay.
And in case we have hurt any being or any to do prayers and then to offer light for as purification practices. If we can please help us through that, that would be
Yes,
very,
okay.
yeah. That's one thing, Venerable.
Okay.
And also to for many people who may, or we have Alice, Venerable, I must say, and share with everyone here that in the process of our cleaning the center, Alice and Anshuman, Pratibha and Madhvi with the other cleaning of other things as well have taken a very important lead, and they've really been working very hard at the center. So, and
Okay.
Shama also last week, yeah.
Yeah,
They've been
excellent. Thank
doing
you.
quite a bit, reorganizing the center. So we want to keep it ready when all the venerables return from the exam. So, yeah, light offerings is one very important thing. And also because Lamrim is coming, the retreat is coming up.
Okay, yeah, okay.
To us who are organizing it personally, it would help if we could get clarity on what to send in terms of materials.
Oh, okay. Yeah, not in the class you're saying, but you were
So in
asking
the class also
yeah.
maybe generally talk about what the benefit of the Lamrim retreat.
Okay, okay.
I will get in touch with all of you personally
Okay.
also about it, but to kind of.
Okay.
And
And Legdon had
because
suggested
he
also
needs
maybe,
this,
yeah,
yeah, the topic after the retreat, I will talk to you all personally and discuss.
okay, okay,
But urgently in terms of 13th and 14th when we come after the exams,
okay,
then immediately urgent requirement is to help us with the light offerings.
yeah, okay.
Maybe
Yeah,
if we can do it 2 times or something like that, it will be very,
okay,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, I will tell them.
And then the retreat will be very intensive for everyone attending. And after that, we'll come back with fresh topics, which I'll discuss with you.
Okay, good. So, yeah, Venerable Legdon also mentioned maybe would you like he or Keldon to go through the morning mantras and the way to pronounce them properly?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the Shakyamuni Buddha meditation, which we didn't get to today.
We can, yes, definitely we
Yeah.
have to do those things, yes.
Okay, so I think they
And
can focus on
as
that.
Alice has requested the 7-limb prayer, the detailed commentary on that.
Okay. And I gave a little bit of that today, but I can just tell them to try to do that next time. I'm just thinking there's only one more session, it would seem, in this module. And so we'll have to decide what to focus on. I think that I finished most of what was in the FPMT recommended material. So they're a little more free to do other things. But I will present this list of things to them, and then they can figure out what makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jesse. Join us in the cleaning next week. Next week, we need everyone's hand. Everyone needs to come. If you can, I mean, all the people in Bangalore who can, if you can, please come, then request you to do it. Venerable, I'm sharing this now.
Okay,
So,
okay.
Can everyone see?
Yes, I can see.
Yes.
Due to the merit of these virtuous actions, and may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha, and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenre Zik Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Okay, so then you can just read the Mixima. We can just make a prayer though for Gebje Lama Rinpoche. We don't do this prayer, but we pray that the Yongzi, the incarnation, is free of obstacles to living a life to continue the great deeds of his predecessor or her predecessor. We don't know, and that we all are able to receive blessings from that and be part of that and continue to receive teachings and be guided by Gebje Lama Rinpoche in this and future lifetime. So then we just conclude Gzema. So we'll just read it in English. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom, Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Sankapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows, Losandrakpa, at your feet I make a request. Okay, thank you. Oh, one more thing to say. I'd forgotten. I was actually requested by a center in the USA to teach on this same topic, establishing a daily practice, to teach all 6 modules. So actually I'm going to start that on the 2nd of September, so a Tuesday. It's 7 a.m. Indian time, which is maybe good or bad, I don't know. So if anybody's interested, you're welcome to join. It's at Tupton Norbuilding Center in Santa Fe in the US. So I'll go through this whole topic much more extensively. And then tomorrow morning, I'll be talking, I was thinking maybe we talked about mind training last time. And I said I'd like to talk a little bit about Shantideva and his text, especially the patience chapter. So just so you're aware, I think I will try to go through that a bit tomorrow morning. So those of you can come. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Venerable, and all the best for your exams.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.